Photo campaigns are more or less well-organized undertakings with a specific purpose, commissioned by a person or institution in a specific context, and by employing specific technologies. We have heard a lot today about the different processes and actors that are involved in the production of a photo campaign, and also in its life even afterwards. And we could paraphrase James Hevia with his notion of photography complex and speak about a photo campaign complex in which all these aspects are considered. Photo campaigns are linked to the idea of a systematic approach, in our case to art historical documentation. However, it sometimes happens that things go in a different direction, or that the meaning of a photo campaign changes depending on space and time. Photographic archives, too, are created by somebody with a purpose in a social and cultural context and in a specific moment in history. And also there, sometimes something goes in an unexpected direction. The figure of the photographic campaign can be useful for a better understanding of the photographic archive as the ecosystem in which the photographs will finally operate. Moreover, both photo campaigns and photo archives contributed and contribute to the shaping of the notion of heritage. In my talk, I will reflect about the archive as a photo campaign, focusing on material from the Photothek of the Kunsthistorisches Institut in Florence. And here comes my disclaimer that I speak also in my title of the archive, but actually I am speaking about an archive, and this is the Photothek in Florence. And I also would like to emphasize that I prefer to speak about the Photothek with its historical name, or about the photo archive that we have here, and not I'm not using the English translation photo library, because I like to underline the dynamic aspects that are included in the notion of archive. And I will start immediately with my first chapters on photo campaigns. Franziska and Georg already said that the term and the notion of photo campaign has a military connotation. And on the Merriam-Webster, you would read that a campaign is a connected series of military operations forming a distinct phase of a war, for instance, a bombing campaign, or a connected series of operations designed to bring about a particular result, an election campaign or an advertising campaign, for instance. One of maybe the first known photographic campaign is that by Roger Fenton in the Crimea War. He was in Crimea in 1855 with the encouragement of the British government, and photographed actually not the war, not what was happening and the horrors of the war, but he's documenting especially what is around the war, the encampments, the landscape. Here you see on the left side Sebastopol from the hills, and on the other side the harbor of Balaclava. There are many portraits of the officers and soldiers. These photographs are maybe connected with a certain propaganda. That's why they don't show the horrors of the war. But of course, there is also, as it was already mentioned, a problem with the photographic technique that would have been difficult to use in such a situation. We encounter the question of evidence, authenticity, objectivity. In the most famous photograph from this campaign, showing cannonballs after a battle, and there is also another version of this photograph without the cannonballs on the path, on the street, only at the sides of the street, and there is a debate if in the second, if there is a first, which is the first, which is the second version, if the second version is the one that you see bigger with the cannonballs on the street, if it was staged. Other interpretations say that one was before the battle without the cannonballs, the other after the battles. I don't have an answer to this question, but anyway, it is interesting that there is already in this first kind of photographic journalistic account this question of authenticity and evidence. And so important is as maybe the first real or considered to be the first real photojournalistic campaign, the campaign by Matthew Brady, or actually by the company of Matthew Brady and his photographers who documented the American Civil War. Matthew Brady sent, I think, 17th photographer to the battlefields from his studio in New York, Washington. He was himself for a very short time there. These photographs that you see here are by Alexander Gardner, and in the photographs there is a lot of material as similar to the material of Roger Fenton from the Crimea War. The officers, and here even the president, and the battle fields without the battle, but we have for the first time the corpses of Confederate soldiers in this series of photographs from the Antietam battle in 1862, that were the first time in which the American and the world public, we can see, were confronted with photographs, so real pictures according to the rhetoric of the objectivity of photography of what was happening on the battlefield. And in general, photography and guns are very much connected. The chronographic gun by Etienne Jules Marais has been already shown today, that he developed in 1882, and that it functions really like a Colt, but it allows to shot very quickly a series of pictures, and so to document the movement, and even the vocabulary of photography is very much connected to guns and to the military until now, shooting, the target, and in digital photography capture, and so on. And we are awaiting a book by Jennifer Tucker on these issues. The photographic campaigns played a very important role in the American westward expansion. Robin Kelsey, in his book Archive Style, studied survey photographs in the American West. And here the documentation of nature as part of the US-American nation-building process is connected to the appropriation of this territory that is shown as empty. And Martha Sandweiss has shown how survey photographs from the American West were done and landed in different archives according to the subject. If they were representing this empty nature that stayed as that offered itself to conquest, they were done by the US Army and they landed in geographical archives, while photographs that were showing the native inhabitants of these not at all empty territories landed in ethnographic collections. And this leads to the topic of photoethnographic surveys, historically very much connected to anthropology, but of course to colonialism, and this monumental publication, photographic publication, The People of India, is a good case studied by Crispini, among others, 8 volumes with 468 pages, realized between 1868 and 1875 by the British government of India. And I've chosen this particular page because I like that the blurring, the failure of the photographic techniques, this blurring is a counterpart to the violence of these photographs perpetrated for pages and pages. And here we have the classification of human beings, and this has to do, of course, with anthropometric photography, with the very concept of expeditions, the colonial gaze, but also police control, and the camera itself becomes a tool of colonization. And between the two, there is Prokudin-Gorsky's documentation of the Russian Empire. I don't go into details explaining the techniques. This is a projection in 3 colors, actually 3 black and white negatives done with filters, with color filters, and this huge project carried on between 1995 and 1915 was documenting the entire Russian Empire and also the breadth of the ethnic groups, a project that Putin would very much like, I think. But there were also photographs for armchair travelers, representing also very often kind of exotic places like Petra or Philae. And this reminds us that this was always commercial. This had always commercial purposes. And here I come from photographic campaigns in general to art history, the already mentioned Mission Héliographique as a bridge to the Photothek, but also because it allows me to connect to the notion of a patrimoine or heritage. Patrimoine also means possession, and there is an idea of a national patrimoine and heritage, but there is also, it is also connected to a more general idea of world heritage, and I will come back to this later. But now I would like to come to a photographic archive, to a specific photographic archive that is the Photothek in Florence. In an art historical research institute, the Photothek that was from the very beginning part of the institute collected photographic campaigns and also conducted photographic campaigns. And I'm showing some examples of photographs that are now actually spread according to the classification system. This is the most recent photographic campaign that we realized 1 month ago in the Villa Salviati, the 500 Villa Salviati near Florence. This is the chapel. But here you see one example from a photographic campaign by Carlo Naia in the Arena Chapel by Giotto in Padua. Photographs realized between 1863 and 65 with the problem of representing colors, a technical problem that has been already mentioned today. And so this is a kind of a photographic campaign that was very important because it is very early, but that was neglected for a very long time. And now it is repurposed as one of our Cimeria Photographica and most important photographs that allow us to investigate the relationship between photographic techniques and art history. A gigapixel photograph of the glass windows in San Francesco in Assisi, realized by Gigoroli, that you can enlarge in an incredible way. Photograph from a bequest of Gustav Ludwig, and here we could reflect about the bequest, the conglomerate of these photographs collected by Ludwig for his research and donated to the Institute as a kind of photo campaign. Here, a photograph by Luigi Artini. He was the photographer of the Institute, so a photograph of our Institute realized in 1977 that was used among many other photographs after the earthquake of 1997 for the restoration of the frescoes in the upper church of Assisi, Giotto, of course. Here, a photo campaign realized by photographer Dror Mayan for our director Gerhard Wolf for a research group on Georgia. Again, a territory very much at the center of war operations in the last year. The campaign is of 2006, so before the war of 2008. A carbon print by Brown, also mentioned today, from one of his photographic campaigns here in the Louvre. We know that the first systematic campaigns by Brown were actually not in, because of the technical problems, not in painting galleries, but in the drawing cabinets. And here, last but not least, this photograph, it is actually an albumen print, but it is also a catalog of Broggi photographs. You see the numbers after which you can order photographs, and this allows me again to recall that photography and photo studios were mostly a commercial enterprise, and that there was a market for photography that went beyond art history. And all these objects are now repurposed for different projects and are in many cases considered rare photographs, while for a very long time they were not anymore important for art historical purposes. But we also have photo campaigns done by artists at our institute. One of them is Guido Guidi, who realized a book commissioned by us in 2017. And the already mentioned Armin Linke, with whom we have several projects. He documented archival practices and how archivists perform the archive and how the archival, the photographic objects operate in the archive in 2018-19, and these photographs were shown in a book, Modalities of Photography. In some cases, one very iconic photograph from this first photographic campaign by Armin Linke became in a certain sense autonomous because it was shown by him in several exhibitions in Stuttgart, Bologna, and it became the poster of the Bologna exhibition, and in Essen and in Paris. And now it has become completely autonomous on the cover of a book that has nothing to do with us and with our Photothek. And the already mentioned collaboration about Alinari gave birth also to a photo campaign by Armin. Alinari, as you might know, is still stored, the archive, also after their acquisition by Regione Toscana, as it was in 2020 when Armin Linke realized these photographs, and they were published in that book. And finally, I would like to mention a project I am working on with Hanna Bader and Armin Linke, the Florence, the City as Archive. We are preparing a book and an exhibition matching together, or putting together, mixing together photographs by campaigns by Armin Linke in several Florentine institutions with photographs from our Photothek. And before I go on with my last chapter, which is probably a bit longer in my talk, I would like to say something about our methodology and about photo objects in the archival ecosystem. And this is something that you have seen already in photographs by Armin Linke, and also in these video stills from his most recent video in the Photothek. We are, both Armin Linke and we at the Photothek, we are interested in the performance of archival practices and in the operations conducted in an archive as a material conglomerate. And so as a recap, I would like to speak about our methodology that sees photographs not as images with 2 dimensions, but rather as 3-dimensional objects that exist, act, and interact in space and time, in social and cultural context. And they are connotated by the printing technique, the technique of the photographs, but also by the stamps, captions, and inscriptions on the cardboards. And their itineraries and their biography bring them also in the photographic archive, and photographic archives themselves are not just repositories of photographs, they are ecosystems in our eyes in which photographs act and interact with other material objects, not only their cardboards and stamps and inscriptions, but also the boxes, the classification system, the donors, the photographers, the inventory books, and of course also the catalogs and the digital catalogs and the databases in which they are catalogued nowadays. I would like to take an object from this conglomerate, from this ecosystem. And this is a special object on which I would like to focus for a couple of minutes. It is a cardboard coming from this box with the label fill in the photos, missing photographs. Of course, a box cannot contain missing photographs because they are missing. The box contains cardboards from which the photograph has been removed and actually stolen. The most photographs from this category have been ripped off the cardboards. In this case, there is a cut, and this cut, the non-existence of the image makes it mandatory to focus on the traces, on the other traces on this cardboard. So we now focus on the inventory number 108339, and according to these to the inventory books, this inventory number means that this cardboard was produced on the 26th of February 1936. And there is a stamp of the Kunsthistorisches Institut in Florence. We read that the photograph was showing a drawing for a salt cellar by Benvenuto Cellini, and that the drawing is preserved in Vienna in the Museum of Decorative Arts. We see a stamp LVFB that is for Luigi Vittorio Fossati Bellani. Luigi Vittorio Fossati Bellani was a collector and amateur who donated 50,000 photographs to the Photothek in the 20s, 30s, 50s. And we also see Vedi Illustrated London News 7734, a hint by Luigi Vittorio Fossati Bellani to the Illustrated London News. And in fact, we can find in the Illustrated London News of that date an article about long-lost goldwork designs by Holbein and others, as we read in the title. And on this article, we see drawing by Benvenuto Cellini indicated as a drawing for a salt cellar. So we can imagine that Luigi Vittorio Fossati Bellani read the article, realized that these drawings were very important because they had been rediscovered in the School of Applied Arts in Vienna, in which they had been used by the students as learning material. And now they were rediscovered as master's drawings sent to London for the exhibition. And Fossati Bellani cut from the journal this reproduction and put it on a cardboard and sent it to Florence. So we now understand, because the photograph was not ripped off of the cardboard but cut out because it was a clipping, and a clipping would have been destroyed by ripping it off. This is the scan of the drawing that is still in Vienna, and these some photographs donated by Luigi Vittorio Fossati Bellani to the Photothek, which again could be interpreted as a photo campaign, because he worked very strict together with the people of the KHI. He was not part of the staff, but he collaborated with them, and he had the intention to fill some gaps in the Photothek, and so he purchased photographs. He commissioned photographic campaigns, but he also cut clippings from journals and put them on the cardboards for our Photothek. Again, the intentionality is something that was already identified together as important for the definition of a photo campaign. And I now come to my last chapter, coming to the early history of the Photothek and the notion of heritage that was starting to take a modern shape at that time. And in fact, the role of photo archives as the laboratories in which the notion of heritage was shaped goes far beyond documentation. They helped fixing historiographic models and periodizations as the grids in which the value of the single monuments is assigned. And we are interested today also in institutionalization processes, and the institutionalization process of the KHI Photothek starts at the second Art Historical Congress in Nuremberg in 1893, when it was decided to establish a research institute, a kind of research station in Florence. And this idea was refined at the congresses of Cologne 1894 and Budapest 1896. And it was also stated, among others, by the Commission for the Foundation of an Institute in Florence, in the passage on the difficult question whether the institute should be a German or international one. I'm quoting that, and here I quote in English. In German, let me quote in German. Der Kongress ist der Vater des Instituts und auf dem Kongress sind Deutsche aus allen Ländern ihrer Sprache und diejenigen Nationen vertreten, welche mit der deutschen Kunstforschung eng zusammenhängen. Holland, Belgien, Skandinavien, Ungarn. Es ergibt sich somit von selbst, dass das Institut ein von deutscher Seite ausgehendes Unternehmen der deutschen und der mit der deutschen Kunstwissenschaft eng verbundenen Nationalitäten ist. So you see that we are in an international context, but at the same time in a context that is very much connotated by a national discourse, and it is the discourse of the Deutsche Kulturnation, of the German cultural nation, and one could say it's satellites. And in any case, the project was realized and the institute was opened in 1897 in the apartment of first director Heinrich Brockhaus. Only in 1912 it was possible to establish the institute in the Palazzo Guadagni on the other side of the Arno. Already in 1899, in a memorandum on the foundation of an art historical institute in Florence, Krauss underlines the foundation of the institute in Florence as an important national and patriotic enterprise, and praises the German national spirit with its objectivity. And the objectivity is also very important in one of the enterprises connected with the foundation of the institute, that is the immediate establishment of the Photothek. It was called Abbildungssammlung in that first time. A collection of photographs that had its raison d'etre in the rhetoric of objectivity of that time and in the idea of photographs as the medium that would provide art historians with the evidence that they needed in order to establish a proper scientific method. And also here we can see the intentionality of establish this photographic collection for the documentation of Italian art. And the collection, the Photothek, was growing very quickly. By the move to Palazzo Guadagni in 1912, we already had more than 12,000 photographs. We have 640,000 plus at the moment, but very important were the first donations by art historians connected to the foundation and the history and the early history of the Institute. And from the very beginning also our own photographic campaigns, and this is for me the opportunity to mention the photographic campaign done by Anchise Mannelli in Le Campora in 96, one of the first organized and paid by the Institute and studied by my colleague Ute Derks, who cannot be here today, and that I would like to mention in this at this point. Foundation of the Institute and of the Photothek and the fast growing of the holdings of the Photothek brought up a paradoxical situation. German scholars in Florence established a successful project of documentation of Italian art, not German art, in the same time in which the new Italian state failed to establish a similar comprehensive documentation of its artistic heritage, although the artistic heritage had been recognized as a symbol of national identity. And here I recall the parallel dates of the Italian unification that occurred between 1861 and 1870, with the annexation of Rome, while the foundation of the German Reich is in 1871. So there is an asymmetry, and I propose to analyze this asymmetry from a decolonizing perspective, suggesting that the photographic documentation can be read as an appropriation of Italian art, as the heritage of the other, for a project, the Kunsthistorisches Institut in Florenz, that is also connected to the construction of a national identity. We don't have a situation of colonialism, of course, but we can maybe apply the idea of a cultural colonialism in this asymmetric situation of which both parties were aware. And here again, the already mentioned Frank Staver Kraus in his memorandum of 1899 offers the geopolitical context and some important keys. And again, I read in German. Es würde sich aus dieser auf italienischem Boden und im Herzen der Halbinsel eingerichteten deutschen Stiftung eine Vertiefung jener nach so vielen Richtungen Erfolge, Ruhm und segensreichen Wechselbeziehungen ergeben, welche seit Jahrhunderten zwischen Deutschland und Italien bestehen und welche nun nach der Wiedergeburt und Einigung beider Nationen in einem Bündnisse Ausdruck fanden, dessen Pflege und Erhaltung allen denen am Herzen liegen muss, welche der eigenen Heimat den Schatz des kulturellen, geistigen, künstlerischen Lebens des Bel Paese und seiner großen Vergangenheit Vorlauf zu gewinnen und zu sichern bemüht sind. So it is not so stressful probably to read the English translation, but you have both. So what we see here, first of all, the geopolitical context, this Bündnis, the alliance, this is the triple alliance entered into by Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy in 1882. So there is on the one side the idea of a German leadership in Renaissance studies that has to be maintained thanks to the Institute, but also the idea of safeguarding and ensuring the treasures of the cultural, spiritual, and artistic life of Italy to their homeland, which is Germany. And here we need to speak about the foundational role of Italian art in German scholarship and in German society, not only for art historians, since the time of Winkelmann and Goethe. Italy was already for a long time a territory of identity projections for German culture, even beyond the long 19th century, also in the 20th century, and I don't speak about today. And I mean, I could mention so many authors, among them Klaus Heitmann, Christine Tauber, Arnold Esch, Jens Petersen, Golo Maurer, who studied the Deutsches Italienbild and all its aspects, and especially with this idea and with this promise of rebirth, of regeneration, also personal regeneration in Italy, that is expressed so well by this quote by Victor Hen, who was himself in Italy in 1839-40. Die Begeisterung für Italien, die Bekanntschaft mit diesem Lande und die Sehnsucht danach wurde in Deutschland ein wesentlicher Teil der Bildung. Jeder, der nicht ganz roh geblieben, fühlte für Italien. Dieses Land gehörte zu der nationalen Erziehung eines Deutschen. Dorthin zu reisen wurde unerlässlich. Wer nicht da gewesen war, in dessen Leben und Gefühl war eine Lücke. So, this was the feeling and the idea shared by the educated German-speaking middle class between Bern and Riga, Hamburg and Vienna, Strasbourg and Prague, the German cultural nation, to which also art historians belonged, and among them the art historians who collaborated in this collective enterprise that was the foundation of the KHI in Florence in 1897. I show here also Karl Friedrich von Rumor, because he's a kind of connecting personality between the generation. These people combined this Italian Sehnsucht, longing for Italy, with Wissenschaftlichkeit, the idea that it was possible to establish a scientific methodology based on demonstrable argumentation and on evidence, and this evidence was guaranteed by photography, and that it was possible to analyze in an objective way the artistic forms. They were shaped by an Hegelian evolutionary historical model that lent itself to think about periodization as a complement to the lives of the artists a la Vasari that were at disposal as a model until then. And in addition to this, there is a certain pressure towards institutionalization coming from Prussian and Austro-Hungarian bureaucracy. And so the establishment of art history as an academic discipline should be seen as part of a wider program, and I'm not saying this, there are studies on this, that regarded scientific progress as a constituent element in Wilhelmine Germany. So, is there something visible from this program in the Photothek? Indeed, there is. Not only the accumulation itself, but especially this German imprint in the Photothek is connected to the classification system and comes from Burckhardt. The classification system is based on artistic genre and on periodization, Epochenbegriffe, and I don't go into details, but it reflects quite exactly some observations by Burckhardt and some content lists of his books, and his idea that the genre and the epochs are more important than the single artists that in our classification system come at a third level. So the KHI was the model for the foundation of the Institut Français de Florence in 1907, 10 years later. This Institut Français de Florence was an overtly national institute that had among his open aims the challenge to the German cultural primacy in Italy. It is a time in which Germany is still an ally of Italy because of the Triple Alliance, but in which at the beginning of the 20th century, France especially is challenging this German cultural primacy in Italy. And among the weapons of the Institut Français de Florence, if you want, there is also a photo collection that is now focused on French art. And the activities of the Institut Français are very known to the art historians sitting at the KHI, as we can read in a letter, probably by Brockhaus. And here I quote only the passage interesting for us. A letter written probably in 1911 or 12, in which probably the director says, das Institut Français von den Universitäten Grenoble, Lyon und Paris gegründet, von der französischen Regierung mit reichlichen Mitteln dotiert, arbeitet mit ungemeiner Energie und nicht geringem Geschick an der Entente Latine. Wir dürfen in diesem Moment die deutsche Flagge nicht einziehen, sondern zeigen, dass wir für Arbeit auf geistigem Gebiet Mittel und Organisation haben. So which is the Italian point of view. We have a document from a paper clippings album in the archive of the Institute of a presentation by Professor Brockhaus in Palazzo Vecchio. And here the Italian journalist notes with a certain sense of humor that the Professor Brockhaus, and I quote in the English translation, Professor Brockhaus replied to the greetings from the Florentine officials in excellent Italian, saying that Italy has always been the dream of all Germans, from the emperor to the lowest soldier, unfortunately, we say. But now they are coming not to conquer, but to admire this real antechamber of paradise. La Nazione, 16 April 1908, as an implicit reaction of Brockhaus to first critiques against Germany. And at the end, the French, not only, of course, because of the Institut Français de Florence, but the French French attempts to break the alliance, as you all know, were successful. And in 1915, Italy broke the alliance, the Triple Alliance, and entered the First World War at the site of the Entente. And the intertwinings, and I'm approaching the end of my talk, the intertwinings of politics, history, culture, and Wissenschaft, again, are very well visible in another passage by Krause, by his pamphlet of 1899. And here again, let me read this very long passage in German. Wir brauchen wohl nicht daran zu erinnern, in welch innigem Zusammenhang die Hinwendung auf diese Studien im Zeitalter der Romantik und der Freiheitskriege mit der nationalen Erhebung stand. Dieselben Männer, welche zu Anfang dieses Jahrhunderts zuerst der großen künstlerischen und politischen Vergangenheit Deutschlands und Italiens ihren Blick zuwandten, waren zugleich die gefährlichsten und entschiedensten Gegner der Fremdherrschaft und der Zersplitterung des deutschen Vaterlandes. Es war der nämliche Geist, welcher die Nation aus ihrem Schlummer zum Kampfe gegen das Joch des Fremden emporrief und der nämliche, der vor ihren Augen die versunkene Herrlichkeit ihrer eigenen nationalen Kunst aufsteigen ließ, zugleich aber auch jenseits der Alpen zuerst wieder jener Bewegung Verständnis abgewann, welche wir die Renaissance nennen und in der wir nächst der Transformation der antiken Welt in eine christliche, die größte, folgenreichste Umwälzung in der Seelengeschichte der Menschheit, eine friedliche Revolution, in der der moderne Mensch geboren und die Grundlage unserer gegenwärtigen Kulturzustände geschaffen wurden, erkennen. And Krauss goes on, es muss immer und immer wieder betont werden, dass das Studium der spezifisch nationalen Kunst, wie es gegenwärtig durch die Inventarisierung der Denkmäler eine so mächtige Förderung gewinnt, doch seinen rechten Platz und seine Verwertung in der allgemeinen Geisteskunst- und Kulturgeschichte nicht finden könnte, wenn die deutsche Forschung nicht ununterbrochen die Fühlung mit der Kunst Italiens und seiner Renaissance bewahrte und in dieser höchsten Schule fort und fort die richtigen Gesichtspunkte für die Beurteilung der nationalen Kunst des Nordens gewähne. So, the Renaissance is a German creation, actually. There is a connection with the patriotic insurrections of the first half of the 19th century. And it is only by studying Italy's artistic heritage that Germans discovered their own. It has been the topic of a very recent article by Hubert Locher. So I come to my conclusion. The foundation of the Kunsthistorisches Institut in Florence in 1897 was embedded in German cultural politics following the creation of the German Empire in 1871. Italy played an important role in the formation of German national identity. The Photothek in particular attests to a widespread German desire to possess Italian artistic heritage, and what matters here are the sheer masses of photographs that the Photothek was able to collect already in the first years of its history. And these photographs were not only assembled, but also efficiently ordered, classified, and made accessible to scholars according to principles that reflected German academic and archival practices. They didn't disappear into the bureaucratic apparatus, but were instead made easily accessible for research, and I have to say, international research. At the time of the foundation of the KHI, the notion of heritage had not yet been clearly defined, but one can imagine that around 1900, Brockhaus and his colleagues considered Italian art to lie at the heart of the concept of word art. Hubert Locher would quote Goethe and his Weltliteratur, and thus of word heritage. And our question today would be, to whom belongs word heritage? In his book, The Seduction of Culture in German History, Wolf Lepenies deals with the German fascination with culture as a kind of noble alternative to politics. And Susan Marchand noted the eminently political and imperialist nature of German cultural initiatives in archaeology, philology, and Oriental studies abroad, outside Germany, even though most were conducted outside the context of actual colonial relations. Their studies sustain my argumentation, again, and very short. The Photothek embodies a type of possession of Italian artistic heritage in the form of photographs. The foundation of the KHI and its Photothek can be interpreted as forms of cultural appropriation. And if we recall the definition of campaign as I gave it at the beginning of this talk, we can conclude that the Photothek is a photo campaign. Thank you very much for your attention.